Well, the concept of the symposium is like taught or that kind of shape that we have these lectures, and after each topic or lectures we would have like discussion or to leave a comment, or if you have any questions. So I'll just be a moderator, and first I would like to thank you, Marcin and Goran. Okay. So this is now time for you if you have any question or comment regarding these lectures that we heard, and experiences and ideas. Actually, I have several questions for Christian, but I will wait him when he's here. So if anyone have any question, you can just raise your hand and speak. Like an introduction, I will start with you, Marcin, and the situation in Poland. When in Croatia we listen about Poland, that is really good nation regarding efficiency of the European fund and applying and receiving European funds for their various projects, for infrastructure, for social entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So can you tell us how in our case in Croatia we are really bad in this? I think we could all agree on that. So we have problems with legislation, we have problems with deadlines, we have problems with know-how. Probably there is a lot of ideas like in Poland, but here we just have some issues that we maybe cannot even address adequately. What are they, where we are wrong? And it seems to us from Croatian perspective that in Poland the situation is different, that you know what to do, how to do and why. So can you tell us a little about this, how come that Poland is such a great in this job? Or is it just our...
That's pretty funny as well, what you're talking, because if I sit at your place and there were some, don't know, Italians or other guys, I would say the same thing, because we love complaining. So I would say that we are not that good at anything, but at the same time, I'm not an expert in that, but I have lots of friends that deal with this topic at Warsaw School of Economics. So the first, there are two answers. There are always two sides of that. So first, we, I don't want to use bad words, but we're not very efficient in that right after we joined European Union. That was 2004, and we had how to explain that in English, country that is not well governed, is just wild and doing and like going because of the inertia, so just going on its own. And then I guess there appeared some people in private sector. My close friend is one of them in the countryside of eastern Poland, so actually the part of Poland that most benefited in the European Union funds. So we should actually start that we were not very convenient about joining European Union, but we finally did it. Then eastern Poland is the part of Poland that was mostly destroyed by Russians, Soviet Union. So we were underdeveloped, and now we can see that we are actually more developed than Western Poland because of the European funds. That's why we already love European Union. That was a huge change. How we did it? First, there was inertia. Everything happened. We wasted dozens of millions of euros. We had lots of fines for that. Then appeared some guys in private sector that used to deal with that. They became just consultants on that. They created their own paths, and then there was 2015, so elections in Poland, so we changed the powers. So instead of having the party that was, well, let's say, trying to go in line with this inertia, we had a huge change from wild private capitalism to state-ruled everything. So from one end to other one. This one is effective as well, maybe not that much effective, but it's still okay. But the first thing that I would complain is that we do not have this something in between. So we do not have NGOs and all the other third parties that would deal with it in a systemic way. Because we used to have wild private guys that used to deal with it later, and as for now we have a strong state institutions that are, we have to admit that they are quite effective, and we have never had such institutions before. So that's great that we have it, but the next step has to be find something in between.
So I think Croatia is in good direction because we are also in inertia, and
in one part.
Yeah. So we need to wait 3 or 4 years.
But maybe you could already jump into this somewhere between.
Maybe.
With such initiatives.
Yeah. Okay, and if you have questions or commenter on another lecture, then you can just cut me and start speaking.
Right.
So for Goran, you said that 3 times you tried to found ethical bank in Croatia, and it doesn't go because of the institutions and law, or
the answer is complex as always. Yeah. So let's say the first time when we applied, of course, looking back at from this perspective, at that point, we were much less ready than we are now. So it could be maybe seen that there were deficiencies in our application, but nevertheless, it was immediately clear that the central bank was not even taking this application seriously. So they, if you see the manner in which they rejected it, it was clear that they haven't even tried to look into our model. They just discarded it as something which is different, so it doesn't have place here. Looking at the broader context, later we actually realized that it is not so much about, it was partly about our model, trying to introduce something new, but it was also part of the policies of the central bank. So the Croatian central bank hasn't issued a single new license for the last 22 years. So to nobody, not to ethical bank, but to not a single new bank. And their public policy, it is something that governor is presenting in his presentations on economical forums, etc., is that he believes that Croatia, as a small country, has to owe its stability of the banking sector to the fact that it has only well-established international, well-capitalized banks who are then guaranteeing this financial stability. I think it's wrong, but you know, it's a matter of policy, and now we were forced to try to find a way how to navigate within the framework of the policy of the central bank.
Would you say that the institutions didn't understood good the idea and the concept that is different from the ordinary banks?
They haven't even tried to understand it. Yeah. I had the opportunity to talk directly to the governor, but then it turned out that actually he's not the one making the decisions. So that there is the second layer in the central bank, which is actually assessing the applications, and those are it's partly, you know, protecting the market status quo of the not actually making the market suitable for existing big players. So kind of the protecting their position, because if you look how the system works, it is quite corrupt. Who could be chosen and nominated for a position in central bank? Those are well-established, recognized bankers, and where those bankers come from? They come from big international banks who are actually having the most of the bankers here, and then they are making decisions about the whole sector. But yeah, they are the same people who were a few years ago actually governing and then leading those banks that now they protect their position. So yeah, it's a problem of a small market, regulator who has no willingness or any kind of intent whatsoever to think about the alternatives, and just corruption, which is unfortunately present in all transition countries.
But there is interest in among public, among
yes, but I think not enough. So personally, I'm quite disappointed how slowly the number of members of ZEF was growing. So when we were preparing our our business plan, we found that we could be on the verge that we could be sustainable as a bank with some kind of with let's say 8,000 clients. It is a mixture of individuals, companies, everything. So it was our calculation. So we were thinking, okay, we could start the bank at the point where we will have like 4,000 cooperative members who would be then immediately the clients of the bank, and we will grow in the first 2 years to this 8,000, which seemed quite realistic number to achieve, even in small country like Croatia. But we never managed to get more than 1,400 members. So I think there was big support from the media, from the public, etc. But this support was not translated into the actual contribution to the promotion of the model, and partly because people are skeptical. They don't believe that something like that is possible. Now somebody is coming saying we are going to set up our new bank, and people are thinking, okay, you are crazy. You know, it's kind of the barrier that was created, that those kind of attempts are not taken as possible and serious in Croatian environment, and that's that really they did a lot of let's say backwind to the project.
Maybe just early. How many inhabitants does Croatia have?
4 million.
3.6.
Yeah.
3.6.
Austria has 8 to 9 million.
Yeah.
And we gathered in the highest point a little bit more than 6,000 cooperatives for a project. We also applied for a license. We also did not get it. Our interpretation is that the existing banks have no interest in a newcomer, let alone in a newcomer. It shows that sustainable banking is possible, because then they would have to admit that they are unsustainable. And there's another point. After the financial crisis of 2008, the European Central Bank became, next to being the highest authority for monetary policy, also the supervision authority. That would have been the European Banking Authority in London, but that was stillborn. It did not come into existence, and that's why the European Central Bank also got the competence of the oversight of the banks too big to fail, banks with total assets of at least 30 billion euros, and very importantly, even the smallest newcoming bank would have has to be approved by the European Central Bank. Yeah. So the authority which gives green or red light is not the Croatian or Austrian, but the European Central Bank. And so this is a tendency of centralization, and now comes, and the central supervision authority has an interest in as few banks as possible, not in as many banks as possible. It's a very hard conflict of interests, and this is a little bit also the background noise, and the fact that a growing public audience, today it's 1,500 and 5,000 at the moment, but in the upcoming years there will be tens of thousands people willing to become member, because the tide is turning and times are changing. But still, this is not an argument for forces that are trying to concentrate and centralize power. As I'm sorry to say that. So that's again my point. I'm always landing at the point of a deeper democracy for that. And
but I noticed while Mia from the European Commission had the presentation, there was one line including ethical banks at European level. So did some change happen at European Commission regarding ethical banks? And does the European Commission have any kind of impact or toward the European Central Bank?
Yeah, that's actually, I think if we look at the root of the problem, because the whole monetary and therefore also supervision system is independent from the politics of the Commission and of the member states. And it even comes to the point where you cannot believe it, what kind of very explicit democratic deficit is happening. So there is Article 130 of the Lisbon Treaty, so it is like the top treaty that is regulating the function of the European Union, which says that neither European Commission, neither government, neither any institution of the European Union or member state has any right to influence in any way policies of the European Central Bank, neither give them, neither to give instructions what to do and how to proceed to the governor of ECB and governance of Central Bank. So that's something that all member states and their leaders have agreed to. To me, it's just incomprehensible. I couldn't understand how such an important tool as banking and monetary policy could be left out of any kind of the democratic process and the democratic supervision. And it goes so far that in our case, it was not only passive resistance where they didn't want a new bank, but at some point we attempted to take over an existing bank, so the bank with the license. It was now coming a little bit to complicated regional relationships. This bank was majority owned by the government of Serbia. You know, Serbia and Croatia are not very well owned, and there was the bank's intent was to develop areas in Croatia where Serbian minority lives. And they were not successful, so they wanted to sell the bank, and we managed to agree 92 or 93% of the shareholders to allow us recapitalization of the bank and takeover of the bank. And one day before the shareholders' assembly, where it will be approved, the central bank intervened, called an extraordinary meeting, and sent the bank into forceful liquidation. You know, it was it was just, we tried to challenge it on the court, but then the central bank intervened again and removed the management of the bank that we were trying to acquire, put their own people from the central bank in the management, what they're allowed to do, and willfully accepted its own liquidation. You know, so it is kind of such a mockery of the justice system and everything.
In Croatia?
It was in Croatia. Yeah.
In European Union.
Yeah, in European Union. Yeah, in the year 2018. Yeah. So you know, it was just.
One more addition on the democratic deficit. You said that our political leaders from Croatia, from Austria, signed the Lisbon Treaty, and the Lisbon Treaty changed the two treaties of the European Union, the Treaty of the European Union and the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. And originally it was foreseen that a convention changed the previous treaties. Was it the Nice Treaty, or the Nice Treaty? I guess it was the Nice Treaty. In a convention, but different from the convention that I talked about today in Chile. It was not a people's convention, because the people might have changed this article and might have changed even the mandate of the European Central Bank. That's now possible in Chile, and I hope that something will happen in Chile about that. Yeah. But different from Chile, the convention to change the European treaties was not elected by the people and was not composed by the people. It was just nominees of members of the parliament and of the governments, and that's why I'm not surprised that this kind of different kind of contexts are today the existing European treaties, and extremely difficult to change the European treaties with a deep democratic deficit. The people just guess. I have a proposal how to change the European Banking Union and how to strengthen the ethical banks. And just think if people would prefer what is today in the treaty, or that alternative. And the alternative is that the European banking union is rethought, and principally only ethical banks are allowed, because banks are such an essential infrastructure for the whole economy that they should not be shareholder companies and they should not be profit-oriented. I made that proposal at least in the German-speaking public discourse, and there was one scientific survey from a German university, and 90% of the people agreed that banks should be principally not profit-oriented. 90%. It was even to me surprising. So the proposal would be there's a transition period at the end of which only ethical banks are allowed in the European Banking Union. And the definition of an ethical bank already exists. There's a huge lucky moment, because the Italians made a definition in a law in 2016, in the budget law, 6 criteria of an ethical bank, and they are locally oriented, and they have an environmental and responsibility impact assessment for every loan, and there is a maximum spread of income 1 to 5, and there's a democratic governance and so on and so forth. So it's a perfect definition of an ethical bank. And after the transition, only these banks are allowed at all to the European Banking Union. And in the transition towards there, the differentiated treatment could be that only banks that commit to that transformation, they get state aid in the meaning of access to the European Central Bank for cheap and safe refinanciation, that they enjoy a savings, a deposit assurance, which is a state aid in all countries, that political units from municipalities to states have business activities with these banks, and that the legal assurance that there will be no bailout for profit banks. And if you ask citizens, which version do you prefer, the current version
or
banks,
this one,
or this one, and that would be European democracy that we're striving for. And that's no matter on which policy field we start to discuss, if we like the current situation or would prefer a different one, we always end up in a discussion on democracy.
Exactly.
That's one point.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Chile, because the current president in Chile is Croat.
Has Croatian origins,
He has Croatian origins, so maybe something is in genes.
The student leader.
Student leader,
Gabriel Boric.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that.
Question for Goran.
Yeah, sure.
Croatia is European exchange rate, and in a few months we will exchange our kuna with euros. I'm interested how this will reflect on ethical banking in Croatia.
I think it will have no influence, even though I'm not yet 100% convinced that we will make the transition. I think it is still a long way to go, whatever the government says. But effectively, we are already so highly euro-oriented country, and without any industry or our own resources that would, or strategy, economic strategy that would actually be able to employ the benefits of having our own currency, that I don't think it will change it in any way. And especially now regarding our new approach that we are now actually coming from Lithuania, from Eurozone as a European ethical bank, I don't think it will affect. But maybe if I may just add the comment, I am a really big believer in the concept of local complementary currencies. And that's a very, very powerful tool to support local development, which has been tested in many areas around the world. And I really believe that the ethical banks should have also a role of the technical support for the management of local sustainable currencies. And I have tried in this debate in Croatia about accession to the Eurozone, I tried to provoke the possibility of maybe doing both, like keeping both currencies, introducing euro and keeping kuna. There are possibilities for that. There there's no legal prevention to do it. There are examples of even countries that were running with parallel currencies for some time during the history, but there is just not enough interest to follow further on that discussion.
On that and on your question, I'm not an opponent of the euro. I think euro is a good idea, but there is one better alternative to the euro, which I would clearly prefer, and which would allow exactly that solution in a different way, and it's the idea of John Maynard Keynes of the 1930s and 40s, and he proposed a global complementary currency, but not a local, but a global complementary currency that would be the trade currency for international economic exchange, and national currencies like the Austrian shilling and the Croatian kuna would persist as local currencies. Yeah. And now comes the exchange rate would be or could be because there are several options, fixed according to real purchase poverty relationships. So there would be a basket of, let's say, 20 consumer goods and services would be defined in global, and then the relationship to the price, the current price of that same basket in kuna would be fixed with the starting date, and of course from the kuna to the tera, and from the tera to the shilling, and then if the relationship between shilling and kuna changes, accordingly the exchange rate to the globe would also change. Yeah. And different from the euro, this would not only bring along stability but also flexibility, because what happens in the eurozone, if Germany is evaluating and Greece actually really devaluating, if both are in the eurozone, they cannot adjust flexibly. So this would be it would be go beyond the European Union. It would be a global solution. It would be a combination of stability and flexibility, but it's a little bit more utopian than building forward the European Union. But just as this is a scientific conference, I wanted at least to mention that solution.
Yeah. Okay. So it was really interesting and enlightened hearing this idea from Aristotle. I read Aristotle few times, but never pay attention to this distinction between oikonomia and what is
Schematistik, yeah? Let's say capitalism.
Yeah, let's say capitalism, and it was really interesting for me. So I would have a question for you regarding the economy for the common good. How do you define common good? Yeah. Within this concept?
Yeah. Theoretically and in philosophy, of course, and also linguistics. I'm a linguist, by the way. There are two ways to define it. One is by God or nature law, or by the dictator, and we reject that option. And second definition is a processual definition, which means that in a given moment, the existing democratic community has to define what it understands collectively by the common good, and we have created a process, a prototype process, which is the involvement of all affected citizens through representation and then democratic voting. Everybody can propose what are the most important and most relevant ingredients of the common good, according to existing prototypes, again from Chile, Manfred Max Neef and others. Usually what remains at the end is health and happiness and good relationships and strong social cohesion and just distribution and environmental stability and strong fundamental rights and peace and so on. So 20 goals remain, but it's always the result of a participatory democratic process. So there is no predefinition of the common good. In our view, or in our proposal, it should be the result of
this process.
Of this process.
And what's the difference between common good and public good? Because all of this that people could put on the list could be seen as public good of the
we
community.
Say common good, public good, general welfare, intérêt général, general interest, and life quality are all the same. And even general well-being. So, these are all synonyms, and they exist in diverse cultures with different names. In Bhutan, they call it national happiness, and it's the same. And in Italian of the medieval age, they called it felicità pubblica, so public happiness. That's very interesting, and it's the same. I don't see, and I'm a linguist, I don't see any aspect of differentiation of these terms.
Okay, and at the beginning of your lecture, you said that you wish to study universal science on universe, holistic approach and everything. It seems to me that if any community or nation or society can define its own common good, then there can be some differences between communities, and this common good then is unable to be universal good.
Of course. As every human being is unique by nature, that's part of our dignity. A cultural collective has the freedom to define its own common good. Only that's the principle and theoretical freedom. So the Chinese people a first and foremost function, which is to protect the satisfaction of basic needs of humans. And maybe in some cultures values seem to be different, but basic needs, by definition, by nature, are the same all over the world because we are part of the same species. And maybe the Chinese government would like to exclude human rights, but the Chinese people, I'm 100% sure, would like to include it. But not necessarily. We have a flexible approach, and it's not a global approach. We have no pretension to have universal belief. It's just for Austria or maximum European Union. And in case the Chinese or the United States, in case the United States included the right to war, or in case the Chinese included the exclusion of human rights, the only consequence would be, well, we don't practice free trade between each other. They have their cultural sovereignty, and it's okay. It's not our business, and the Chinese have theirs. But then we might to trade preferentially with other nations who respect peace and who respect human rights, because this is our value choice, and that's our freedom, and there is no need at all to free trade with anyone like today. That's the only consequence of a potentially differentiated outcome of these democratic bottom-up processes.
It seems to me as a theologian and philosopher that regarding common good, that we should found them in nature, human nature, common nature, as you said a little earlier. We are all humans. And I think that what is Pope Francis is trying to do also, to say out loud that since we are all humans, we have common nature, we have common needs, fundamental needs, we have similar tastes regarding our quality of our life. It seems to me that from this perspective, insisting on natural law and nature, common nature, would give, how do you say, a stronger idea about commonality or universality of common good.
I don't know if I got your point precisely, but my intuition says that let's put it like this. I have a strong spiritual background, but I do never argue with it, because if someone does not share the same spiritual background or does not have a connection to spirituality at all, we won't understand each other. That's why in my political appearances, I always say very clearly, I'm a child of the Enlightenment. And my arguments are philosophical, ethical, rational. And this is possible because I can talk rationally, ethically, and philosophically about dignity, justice, solidarity, and sustainability. That's possible. But I would not argue with because I feel it spiritually that these are the right values. And that's why we propose these processes, because we trust in that if humans listen to their inner wisdom, of course not of every human being, the outcome will be the same, but of humans as collectives, no matter where in the world, the outcomes will progressively converge towards a common understanding of the common good, which I agree to understand as universal, as created by God. But I avoid this terminology in order not to frighten people who are not in connection with this terminology and who prefer a more rational naming of these.
If we start our discussion with answers, what good of discussing
exactly,
of the process?
Exactly.
Actually, my lecture will be a little more. It's about critical challenge toward common understanding of the common good. So, my argument will be that in some cases we do not understand each other when we speak about some topics. And, yeah. Any question, comment? Maybe you in between, or some final thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
Maybe to refer to the other models and approaches. So I've been invited to introduce one facet of the diamond, and here's another facet of the diamond, and another facet of, and there are many other facets of the diamond. And I was asking you about the focular movement and the economy of the communion, and my proposal as part of the network of ethical and sustainable economic models is the following. After 25 years of engagement, I very much like that you Goran, made a similar criticism of economic science, and it's rather economic ideology than science, because it's highly unscientific, as you put it, and I did it the same in the morning. So fortunately there is a growing movement of more pluralism in economics, in economic science, and this is one layer of our common work. And one excellent page is a page which is called Exploring Economics, and rather than reducing economic science to the neoclassical approach, which is taught almost all over the world at faculties of economics and business schools, they highlighted 10 alternative theoretical schools which are on the same footing as neoclassical economics. No school is perfect, all are deficient, but all have the legitimation just because they are widely shared theoretical schools of economics with participation of many scientists. But true science would highlight all of them, from classical to neoclassical to Keynesian to institutional to historic to Marxist to Austrian and ecological and feminist economics. And we should support all forces in all countries that go for that plurality of approaches. And maybe one university after the other establishes a chair for pluralist economics. And as a previous exercise is what I mentioned in the morning, is an introductory program at universities for students interested in economy to get to know these facets of the diamond. So that's not so much getting to know these theoretical schools, therefore hardcore scientists, but these practical models. And these courses at university could teach, let's say, 12 models in 12 units. One is gift giving, one is ethical finance, one is economy for the common good, one is circular economy, one is economy for the communion, one is social and solidary economy, just to name a few. And then students may develop an appetite on more of it. So that's one proposal how these facets could collaborate and also inspire universities to become part of the transformation process in thinking and also in practice. That's one of the proposals that I came up to my mind when I self-reflected my role in this conference.
Yeah, that's great. We will try to implement this idea here in Croatia. I think the problem is that professors at economy or on other faculties just don't know. do not have information. And as the lady from the European Commission said, and Theodor repeated, we need to find channels for communicating these informations. Yeah, and we will try to do that.
You could make a tender. That's a kind of it's not a joke, it's serious, but it's a tender. We're looking for a university in a country, no matter if it's a state university, University of Applied Science, or any other type of university or business school, who is interested in disseminating the facets of the diamond, the alternative economic approaches, and then you can even instruct them how it's done. You can show prototypes that from Argentina or others, and then maybe they are more willing to go to action.
Okay, so thank you everybody for this interesting day. A lot had been heard and I learned a lot. Now we are done for today. We go to have some dinner and we will meet tomorrow here at Faculty of Economy, not in this room but in other, but at Faculty of Economy.